The Empire Building stood imposingly in the financial heart of London. On the 40th floor, Roderick Mendoza contemplated the city through the glass wall of his office. At 45, he was the founder of Mendoza Construction, one of the largest engineering firms in the country. His projects spanned 4 continents, and his name was among the most influential businessmen in the United Kingdom. That June afternoon, the London sky displayed a grey hue, portending rain. Roderick adjusted the platinum watch on his wrist and took a deep breath, trying to contain his frustration. News of the cancellation of the billion-pound project in Dubai still echoed in his mind like a persistent alarm. It was to be the first skyscraper with his signature in the Middle East, a dream that had just crumbled due to political issues beyond his control. "Mr. Mendoza, your video conference with the Chinese investors is scheduled for 4 o'clock, Patricia, his assistant, announced through the half-open door. Roderick made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "Cancel all my appointments for the next few days, Patricia. I need some time." The woman hesitated, surprised by the unusual request. "But, sir, the board is waiting for a response regarding—" "Cancel everything," he interrupted with a firmness that allowed no dispute. "And have the jet prepared. I'm going to Yorkshire." Minutes later, Roderick drove his Porsche through the congested streets of London, heading for London City Airport. On the passenger seat, a folder containing documents he hadn't opened in years. The deeds to a mansion he had commissioned for his parents in Havenbrook, a small town in rural Yorkshire where he was born. The memories he had worked so hard to bury began to emerge like bubbles in boiling water. Son of Sebastian and Dolores Mendoza, Roderick had grown up in a simple wooden house where a tight budget was a constant. At 17, he had left for Manchester with an engineering scholarship, vowing never to return to that life of privations. During university, he worked as a waiter, a salesman, and in any job that paid his bills. He graduated with honors, and at 25 founded his first company. Success came quickly, driven by his keen business acumen and an ambition that seemed to know no bounds. As the private jet cut through the skies towards Yorkshire, Roderick leafed through photos of the mansion project he had commissioned for his parents, a luxurious 700-square-meter construction with a swimming pool, winter garden, and mountain views. He had entrusted the mission to Rennie, his cousin, who had remained in Havenbrook and become an architect. The trust placed in Rennie dispensed with constant supervision, at least that's what he believed. It had been almost 8 years since he last visited his parents. He compensated for his absence with generous monthly deposits and expensive gifts on special occasions. In rare phone calls, he would hear his mother's voice thanking him, always evasive when he asked about the new house. "Everything is fine, my son," was the invariable reply. The plane landed at the nearest regional airport, where a rented car awaited him. Roderick dismissed the offer of a driver. He wanted to make that last stretch alone, without witnesses to whatever he might find. As he drove away from the main highway, the roads became narrower and more precarious. The rain began to fall timidly at first, then mercilessly. The luxurious rented car rattled over the potholes of the dirt road leading to Havenbrook. "Why do they insist on staying in this god-forsaken place?" he thought, irritated by the mud already dirtying the vehicle. After all, he had offered them apartments in Manchester countless times, even in London. The answer had always been the same. "Our place is here, son." When he spotted the rusty sign indicating the entrance to Havenbrook, an uncomfortable sensation settled in his chest. The town seemed smaller and more dilapidated than in his memories. The same simple houses, the same unpaved streets, the same people sitting on their porches watching the rain fall. Nothing there seemed to have prospered in the 25 years since his departure. He slowed down as he passed the central square, noticing the curious glances of the residents at the luxury car, a rare sight in that time-forgotten place. He felt a mixture of pride and discomfort. He was the son who had left there and conquered the world, but also the son who had abandoned his roots. As he approached the street where he grew up, his anxiety increased. He was about to surprise his parents with his visit and finally see with his own eyes the mansion he had built for them. He imagined their reaction of happiness, warm hugs, and apologies for his prolonged absence. Perhaps this was the right time to bring them both to London, to finally assume his responsibilities as a son. Jasmine Street remained the same, narrow with modest houses lined on both sides. Roderick slowed down even more, his eyes searching for the mansion that should stand out in that humble setting. His heart raced when he spotted number 78, his childhood address. He abruptly parked the car in the middle of the street, unable to believe what his eyes saw. There was no mansion, only his parents' old wooden house, now visibly deteriorated by time, and in front of it, a group of men carried furniture into the street in the torrential rain, while his parents watched, dejected, sitting on a soaked armchair. A man in a cheap suit, with a clipboard in his hands, gestured authoritatively. Roderick recognized the scene immediately. It was an eviction. He got out of the car, ignoring the rain that now soaked his bespoke Italian suit worth thousands of pounds. The world around him seemed to spin in slow motion as he walked towards his parents, trying to understand what was happening. Father? Mother? His voice came out strangled, almost inaudible beneath the sound of the storm. Sebastian Mendoza, now a man nearing 80, raised his tired eyes. On his wrinkled face an expression of shock, followed by something Roderick never imagined seeing there: shame. Chapter 2. The Truth Revealed. Roderick? What are you doing here? Dolores's voice trembled as she recognized her son, while futilely trying to shield a photo album from the falling rain. Sebastian stood up with difficulty, leaning on an improvised cane. Go away, son. It's not a good time, the old man said, with a dignity that contrasted with the humiliating situation he was in. What do you mean, go away? Roderick approached, water streaming down his face, mixing with the first tears he had shed in years. What is happening here? The man in the suit interposed himself between Roderick and his parents. I'm sorry, sir, but this property has been repossessed by the Yorkshire Regional Bank. The former owners have until the end of the day to remove their personal belongings. Roderick felt his blood boil. He grabbed the man by his soaked collar. Former owners? This house has belonged to my parents for over 50 years. Roderick, please, Dolores implored, pulling her son's arm. Don't make things worse. One of the workers carrying the furniture recognized the businessman. Hey, aren't you that rich guy from TV? The owner of Mendoza Construction? A murmur spread among those present. Roderick ignored the stares and whispers, focusing only on his parents. His questioning gaze demanded explanations. Let's talk inside, Sebastian suggested, indicating the house with a defeated gesture. The bankman intervened again. I'm sorry, but you can no longer enter. The locks have already been changed. That was the last straw. Roderick pulled out his cell phone, dialed a number, and stepped away for a few moments. When he returned, his expression had completely changed. A cold calm had replaced the initial despair. Mr. Almeida, that's your name, correct? He asked, reading the bank employee's badge. I just spoke with your bank's president. The mortgage on this house has just been paid off, and I have just purchased the title deed. You will receive confirmation in a few minutes. The man stared at him, incredulous. That's impossible, sir. The procedures. Check your email, Roderick interrupted, relentless. And while you wait, order your men to put everything back in its place, now. The employee's cell phone rang. He answered, listened for a few seconds, and his face paled. Yes, Mr. Director, I understand perfectly. He hung up, visibly embarrassed. It seems there's been a change of plans. Men take the furniture back inside. Roderick didn't wait to see the order carried out. He took his parents by the arms and led them to the car, turned on the heater, and offered them the towels he found in the glove compartment. Now tell me, what's this story about a mortgage? And where is the mansion I had built for you? The elderly couple exchanged looks laden with sadness. Dolores began to cry silently, while Sebastian took a deep breath as if gathering courage to confess a terrible mistake. There is no mansion, son, the elder Mendoza finally said. Rennie tricked us. He made us sign papers we didn't fully understand. He mortgaged our house and disappeared with the money you sent. The revelation hit Roderick like a punch to the stomach. His own cousin, whom he had trusted, had robbed his parents. Why did you never tell me? He asked, feeling a mixture of anger and guilt gnawing at him from within. We were ashamed, Dolores replied, wiping her tears with trembling hands. You always wanted to give us a better life, and we allowed ourselves to be tricked like two foolish old people. Besides, Sebastian added, with bitterness in his voice, you were always so busy. For months you hadn't answered our calls. We thought we would solve it ourselves. His father's words were like daggers in Roderick's chest. It was true. In recent years, he had let his parents' calls go to voicemail, returning them only when he had time. Promised visits were always postponed due to important meetings, business trips, unavoidable commitments. How long ago did this happen? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. Almost 3 years ago, Sebastian replied. Rennie said that construction problems were normal, that everything was on track. Meanwhile, he used the credit card you gave us for personal expenses. When we realized what was happening, it was already too late. Roderick closed his eyes, trying to control the rage building inside him. 3 years. For 3 years, his parents had faced betrayal, debts, and the fear of losing the only thing they truly owned, their home, alone. Why didn't you withdraw the money I deposit monthly into your account? He questioned, confused. Dolores lowered her gaze, embarrassed. Rennie also had access to that account. He said he was managing the money for the construction of the new house. When we discovered the truth, the account was empty, and we were already in debt. We trusted him because he's family, Sebastian added, and because you recommended him. We thought if you trusted him, the sentence didn't need to be finished. The reality was crystal clear. Roderick had abandoned his parents to their own devices, delegating his responsibilities to a cousin he barely knew, all to avoid dealing with that part of his life he so desperately wanted to forget. The painful silence inside the car was broken by the sound of an approaching vehicle. An old rusty Fiat Uno stopped a few meters away, and from it emerged a man in his 40s, wearing clothes that betrayed recent prosperity, but of questionable taste. Rennie, Sebastian murmured, pointing to the newcomer. Roderick felt his whole body tense. There was the man who had betrayed his trust, who had robbed his parents, who had humiliated them. His cousin seemed satisfied watching the eviction, until his gaze met the businessman's. The smile on his face vanished instantly. Stay here, Roderick ordered his parents, opening the car door. The rain continued to fall, but no one seemed to care now. The bank employees and workers stopped what they were doing, sensing that something important was about to happen. Neighbors approached, forming a semicircle of curious spectators. Rennie froze as he recognized his cousin. His first reaction was to turn around and get back into his car. But Roderick was already a few meters away. Don't even think about it, the businessman said, with a calm that was more terrifying than any shout. Roderick. What a surprise. Rennie stammered, trying to hide his fear. I was just coming to see how Uncle Sebastian and Aunt Dolores were. Really? Roderick moved closer. You didn't seem very concerned when you stole their money and mortgaged their house. Rennie's face paled. I don't know what you're talking about. There were complications with the construction and... Spare me your lies, Roderick cut him off. I know exactly what you did. You forged documents, embezzled money, and left my parents on the brink of ruin. The spectators murmured, some filming the scene with their cell phones. The story of Havenbrook's illustrious son confronting the cousin who had betrayed the family would provide gossip for years in that small town. Listen. Roderick, I can explain. Rennie tried, taking a step back. There's nothing to explain. Roderick's voice was sharp as steel. You will face the consequences of your actions. Not today, not through impulsive revenge, but through justice. He turned to the bank employee, who was watching the scene open-mouthed. I want to file a formal complaint for fraud and forgery against this man. He pointed to Rennie, who was now visibly trembling. And I suggest he doesn't try to leave town. The federal police are already on their way. Chapter 3. The Confrontation. The sky over Havenbrook seemed to be falling. The rain, which had previously fallen like a constant curtain, now poured down in heavy drops, turning the dirt streets into deep mud. Rennie looked around like a cornered animal. You can't do this to me, he said, alternating between plea and threat. We're family. Roderick let out a dry laugh, devoid of any humor. Family. You have the nerve to mention that word after what you did to my parents? The crowd that had formed around the two men grew by the minute. Neighbors, bank employees, eviction workers, all absorbed every word of the confrontation, some pointing cell phones to record the moment. Times were tough, Rennie justified, his voice trembling. "I had debts, I needed the money. The intention was always to return it." "Spare me," Roderick cut him off. "You not only stole the money I sent, but you also endangered the only asset my parents had. That is unforgivable." From inside the car, Sebastian and Dolores watched the scene with a mixture of sadness and relief. For years they had carried the weight of that betrayal in silence, trying to protect their son from the shame they felt. Roderick moved closer to Rennie, who backed away until he felt the cold metal of his car against his back. The businessman spoke softly now, but every word carried a cold promise. "I will destroy you legally, Rennie. Every penny embezzled, every forged document, every lie told, everything will be exposed. When I'm done, your name will be synonymous with fraud in this town and anywhere you try to start over." A police car appeared on the corner, slowly advancing down the muddy street. Two officers got out and walked towards the group, shielding themselves from the rain as best they could. "What's going on here?" asked the older officer, Sergeant Carter, a familiar figure in small Havenbrook. This man, Roderick pointed to Rennie, defrauded my parents, embezzled a considerable sum of money, and forged documents to mortgage their house. The sergeant looked from Rennie to Roderick, then to the group of spectators. "Those are serious accusations, Mr. Mendoza. Do you have proof?" "I have all the bank transfers, the original contracts, and the forged powers of attorney," Roderick replied. "My lawyer is emailing everything to the police station right now." Rennie's face paled even further. His eyes darted from side to side, searching for an escape that didn't exist. "This is absurd," he tried to argue. "It was all an investment that went wrong." Uncle Sebastian and Aunt Dolores knew the risks. Sebastian, who had gotten out of the car and slowly approached, leaning on Dolores, intervened with a tired voice. "You made us sign papers we didn't understand." "Rennie, you said they were to start the construction of the new house. You never mentioned mortgaging our home. And the withdrawals from the bank account?" Dolores added with surprising firmness. "You said it was for building materials, but we never saw a single brick delivered." The police officers exchanged meaningful glances. Sergeant Carter approached Rennie. "I believe you will have to come with us to the station for clarification." Rennie cast a desperate look at Roderick. "You don't understand. I had a plan. It was all going to work out, but things got out of control. Please, Roderick, we're cousins. We grew up together." "You should have thought of that before betraying the family's trust," Roderick replied, impassive. As the police led Rennie to the patrol car, the bank employee approached Roderick, visibly nervous. "Mr. Mendoza, I just received confirmation from headquarters. The transfer was successfully completed. The property is once again in your parents' name, and all outstanding debts have been settled." Roderick nodded dryly. "Excellent. Now I'd like your men to finish putting everything back in its place, and I want a cleaning and repair crew here as soon as possible." The man quickly agreed. "Yes, sir. It will be arranged immediately." With Rennie inside the patrol car and the workers rushing to undo the eviction, Roderick finally turned his attention to his parents. They were soaked, exhausted, and still visibly shaken. He gently led them back inside the house. The wooden walls showed damp stains, the roof leaked in several places, and the floor creaked dangerously under his feet. "How could you live like this?" he murmured, more to himself than to his parents. Sebastian sat heavily in his old armchair, which was now back in its original spot. "It's our home, son. It always has been." Dolores was busy collecting wet photographs, trying to save them from the damage caused by the rain. Roderick picked up one of the portraits, himself, at 5 years old, smiling with missing front teeth, hugging his parents in front of that very house. "You should have told me," he said, feeling his throat tighten. "I would have come immediately." "You were busy building your empire," Sebastian replied, without accusation in his voice, merely stating a fact. "We didn't want to be a burden, a burden." Roderick felt as if each word was a stab. "You are my parents. Parents you barely visited in the last 8 years, Dolores observed, with the frankness only a mother could have, who received expensive gifts but never your presence, who heard stories about your success but could never share in it." Roderick opened his mouth to protest, but the words died on his lips. It was all true. While building skyscrapers around the world, he had let what truly mattered crumble. He believed that the money sent monthly was enough to demonstrate his love, when in reality, It was just a way to appease his guilty conscience. I failed you, he finally admitted, his voice choked. I thought money would solve everything, that I could compensate for my absence. He looked around at that simple house he had tried so hard to forget. Every corner held a memory of his childhood, the place at the table where he did his homework, the corner where his mother used to sew, the small room he had shared with his brother, who had left too soon. "And the mansion you wanted to build?" Sebastian asked, interrupting his thoughts. "What happens now?" Roderick walked to the window, watching the rain begin to subside. Jasmine Street, with its modest houses and hard-working residents, now seemed a mirror of everything he had tried to leave behind. "I don't know if a mansion would make sense here," he answered honestly. "Perhaps it's time to think differently." An idea began to form in his mind, not a plan of escape as so many times before, but a project of reconstruction, not just of his parents' house, but of something larger, something that could bring dignity to that place forgotten by time and progress. "What are you thinking, son?" Dolores asked, recognizing that distant look Roderick had had since childhood, when a new idea captivated him. "I'm thinking that perhaps it's time to use my knowledge for something beyond luxury buildings and gated communities," he replied, a small smile forming on his lips. "Perhaps it's time to rebuild not just this house, but this entire place." The look of confusion on his parents' faces made him realize he needed to be more specific. "Havenbrook has been forgotten by progress, abandoned as a place without a future," he continued. "But what if we could change that? What if we could transform this town into a model of sustainable development?" Sebastian frowned, skeptical. "That seems too big a dream, son. This town has nothing to offer someone like you." "You're wrong, father," Roderick replied, excitement growing in his voice. "It has something no metropolis could give me, the chance to repair my mistakes. To rebuild not just houses, but bonds. To use my knowledge to transform the place where I was born." Dolores approached her son, touching his face with her wrinkled hands, as she did when he was small. "Are you serious, Roderick? Do you really plan to stay?" For a moment, the old instinct to flee threatened to overcome him. The idea of abandoning his life in London, his millionaire contracts, his luxury apartment, everything seemed terrifying. But then he looked into his mother's eyes, saw the hope mixed with skepticism, and knew there was no other way. "I'm serious, Mother," he replied, covering her hand with his own. "It's time to come home." Chapter 4. The Reconstruction. The news that Roderick Mendoza, Havenbrook's illustrious son, had returned and planned to invest in the town spread like wildfire. In less than 24 hours, the story had already reached mythical proportions. They said he would buy the whole town, build a luxury resort, transform the place into a British Dubai. Oblivious to the rumors, Roderick had spent the night in a small hotel in the neighboring town, the only establishment with minimally adequate infrastructure to accommodate him. He returned to Havenbrook at dawn, driving his rented car more carefully through the muddy streets after the previous day's storm. At his parents' house, a cleaning crew hastily hired by the bank was already at work, removing the dirt accumulated by the interrupted eviction. Sebastian watched everything with suspicion from the porch, while Dolores offered coffee to the workers, unable to abandon her hospitality even in those circumstances. "Good morning, Father," Roderick greeted, climbing the creaking steps of the old wooden staircase. Sebastian responded with a nod, his eyes fixed on the activity in his house. "Is all this really necessary?" he asked, indicating the workers with a vague gesture. "We could clean it ourselves." Roderick smiled, recognizing his father's wounded pride. "It's the least the bank can do after the trouble they caused," he replied, sitting next to the old man. "Besides, you and Mother need to rest." Dolores appeared at the door, carrying a tray with coffee and freshly baked cheese scones. "Son, have you had breakfast yet? I just made cheese scones the way you liked them when you were a boy." The familiar aroma hit Roderick like a wave of nostalgia. How many mornings had he spent on that same porch, devouring his mother's cheese scones before rushing off to school? It seemed like a distant life belonging to another person. "Thank you, Mother. It looks delicious." As they ate in silence, observing the movement of the small town awakening, Roderick mentally organized the next steps. He needed to assess his parents' financial situation, understand the extent of the damage caused by Rennie, and most importantly, begin structuring the project he had conceived during his sleepless night. "I have a meeting at the town hall at 10 o'clock, he announced, checking his watch. "Then I need to make some calls to London and restructure my agenda for the coming weeks." "Are you really staying?" Sebastian asked, still incredulous. "Yes, father. At least until I get the project on track." Dolores exchanged a meaningful glance with her husband. There was hope there, but also a caution born of previous unfulfilled promises. "And what exactly is this project?" she asked, sitting next to the two men. Roderick took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. "Havenbrook has the potential to become a model for sustainable development for small British towns," he began, his enthusiasm evident in his voice. "We have abundant water, fertile land, a favorable climate, and we are relatively close to major centers. What is lacking is infrastructure and opportunities. And you think you can change that?" Sebastian asked, skepticism still present in his voice. "I think I can help start a transformation," Roderick replied, with a humility that surprised even himself. "Not alone, of course. I will need the support of the community, local authorities and business partners who share this vision." "It sounds too ambitious," Dolores commented, worried. "So you always had big dreams, son, but this—" "That's exactly why it will work, Mother," Roderick interrupted, taking the old woman's hand in his. "Mendoza Construction didn't become what it is today because I thought small. The difference is that this time, I'm not just building with steel and concrete, but with purpose." At precisely 10 o'clock, Roderick parked in front of the town hall, a modest two-story building that seemed not to have received a fresh coat of paint in decades. Mayor Anthony Finch, a man in his 60s, was already waiting for him at the entrance, visibly nervous about the businessman's presence in his town. "Mr. Mendoza, what an honor to welcome you to our humble town hall," he greeted effusively, extending his hand for an exaggerated handshake. "I heard about the unfortunate incident with your parents. A shame for our town. I've already ordered a full investigation into how something like this could happen right under our noses." Roderick maintained a neutral expression, aware that the mayor probably knew about the whole situation much earlier and had done nothing. Havenbrook was too small for anything to escape the attentive ears of local politics. "Thank you, Mayor, but I didn't come here to talk about the past but about the future," he replied, following Anthony inside the building. The meeting, initially scheduled only with the mayor, quickly turned into a small event. Municipal secretaries, councillors, and even the local vicar gathered in the meeting room to hear what the distinguished visitor had to propose. Roderick was not intimidated. He was used to presentations for much more demanding audiences. For 2 hours, he presented his vision for Havenbrook, a pilot project for sustainable urban revitalization, starting with Jasmine Street and gradually expanding to the rest of the town. Eco-friendly homes for the elderly, a community center with permanent medical assistance, urban gardens, solar energy, reclaimed water treatment, and, most importantly, professional training for the region's youth. The idea is to create a replicable model that can inspire other towns in the countryside, he concluded. Havenbrook can become a national example of how small communities can prosper without losing their identity. A stunned silence followed his presentation. Those present exchanged glances, uncertain how to react. Mayor Anthony was the first to speak. "It's certainly ambitious, Mr. Mendoza," he commented, scratching his head. "But how much would all this cost? The town hall can barely keep the streets free of potholes. The initial investment would come from Mendoza Construction as part of our corporate social responsibility program," Roderick clarified. "I'm not asking for money. Mayor, I'm offering a partnership." The mayor's eyes lit up at the prospect of a major project that would not require municipal resources and would still yield considerable political dividends. "In that case, Mr. Mendoza, you can count on our full support," he exclaimed, excited. "Whatever you need from the town hall, just ask. I need agility in licensing processes, full transparency in project management, and most importantly, real community involvement," Roderick replied seriously. "I don't just want to build things for people. I want to build with them." After the meeting, as he returned to his parents' house, Roderick couldn't help but notice the curious glances of the residents. Children ran alongside his car, pointing and smiling. Elderly people on their porches greeted him with timid waves. He had forgotten what it was like to be known by everyone in a small town, the sensation simultaneously comforting and overwhelming of never going unnoticed. He parked in front of his parents' house, where the cleaning crew was finishing their work. The old wooden structure looked a little less dilapidated, but it was still evident that it needed urgent repairs. Roderick made a mental note to hire a structural assessment team as soon as possible. Upon entering, he found his parents in the living room, talking with a grey-haired lady he immediately recognized, Mrs. Carmine, an old neighbor and family friend. "Roderick! How grown you are, boy!" the elderly woman exclaimed, opening her arms for a hug. "Last time I saw you, you still had pimples." He smiled, accepting the warm embrace. "It's good to see you, Mrs. Carmine. You haven't changed a bit." The woman let out a hearty laugh. "Oh, you liar! I'm old and wrinkled like a prune, but I still have eyes good enough to recognize a handsome man when I see one." The conversation flowed naturally, with Mrs. Carmine updating him on the neighborhood's inhabitants, who had left, who had arrived, who had married, who had had children. Roderick was surprised to realize that he still remembered most of the people mentioned, and even more surprisingly, that he cared about their stories. "And Mr. Januario, Mrs. Carmine, is he still at the workshop?" he asked, referring to the lady's husband. Her smile faded a little. "Januario left us 3 years ago, my son. His heart couldn't take it." "I'm sorry," Roderick murmured, ashamed for not knowing. "Don't worry. Life goes on. Now I'm alone in that big house, just me and my plants. The children all left, like you, in search of a better life in the big cities." The observation, made without any accusation, touched Roderick deeply. How many stories like Mrs. Carmine's existed in that town? How many elderly people lived alone in houses deteriorated by time, abandoned by their children, who sought opportunities elsewhere? "Mrs. Carmine," he began, a new idea forming in his mind. "What would you think about participating in a community project? We'll need people who know the town and its residents well." Chapter 5. Transformations. 3 weeks had passed since Roderick's return to Havenbrook. What had begun as an impulsive visit had transformed into a personal mission of redemption and reconstruction. His apartment in London remained closed, visited only by the assistant he had sent to retrieve important documents and a few changes of clothes. The news that billionaire Roderick Mendoza was renovating his hometown was already circulating in the country's main newspapers. Some speculated about a possible midlife crisis, others about a marketing strategy for his company. Few understood the true motivation behind that radical change. That Sunday morning, the parish hall in Havenbrook was packed. Residents of all ages gathered for the official presentation of Project Rebirth, as Roderick had named the initiative. Plastic chairs were arranged in a semicircle, and an improvised projector displayed images on the peeling wall. At the back of the hall, Sebastian and Dolores watched their son with a mixture of pride and disbelief. It was still difficult for them to associate that confident man, dressed in jeans and a simple shirt, with the insecure boy who had left vowing never to return. "Good morning, everyone," Roderick began, his voice echoing in the silent hall. "I thank each of you for being here this Sunday. I know many sacrificed their day of rest to be here, and that already demonstrates this community's commitment to its own future." The attentive eyes of the audience followed him, some with hope, others with skepticism. Roderick recognized former teachers, neighbors, childhood friends, now adults with their own children. It was as if time had both passed and stood still in Havenbrook. In recent weeks, along with a team of architects, engineers, and urban development specialists, we have mapped the most urgent needs of our town, he continued, consciously emphasizing the hour. We also had the participation of a community council formed by residents from different neighborhoods. He pointed to a group seated in the front row, where Mrs. Carmine stood out with a proud smile. Beside her, other elderly people and some young people waved shyly when mentioned. Project Rebirth is not a charity initiative, Roderick explained, moving to the first slide of the presentation. It is an investment in the human and economic potential of Havenbrook. We do not want to create dependence but autonomy. For the next hour, he detailed every aspect of the project: the revitalization of homes starting with Jasmine Street, a community health center, a technical school in partnership with educational institutions from Manchester, a shared solar energy system, community gardens, and a sustainable rural tourism program leveraging the region's natural beauty. The first phase of works will begin tomorrow, he announced, causing murmurs of surprise. Residents of Jasmine Street will be temporarily relocated to dignified accommodations, while their homes are rebuilt or renovated according to the structural needs of each. No one will lose their property, he made sure to emphasize. We are simply improving what already exists. At the end of the presentation, he opened the floor for questions. The first came from Mr. Anthony, owner of the town's only grocery store. With all due respect, Mr. Mendoza, why should we trust that you won't leave again when you get tired of playing savior? An awkward silence fell over the hall. The question, though harsh, echoed the doubt present in the hearts of many. Roderick took a deep breath before responding. It's a fair question, Mr. Anthony, he acknowledged. I cannot prove my intentions with words. Only time and my actions can do that. But I can guarantee that all project contracts have continuity clauses that oblige my company to complete the work initiated, regardless of my physical presence. He paused, looking directly into the man's eyes. Furthermore, I have moved Mendoza Construction's regional headquarters to Havenbrook. We have already rented the old cooperative warehouse and started hiring local personnel. This is not a fleeting project. It is a long-term commitment. The answer seemed to satisfy most, but skepticism still lingered. Another hand went up. It was Helen, a teacher at the only municipal school, whom Roderick vaguely remembered from his childhood. You mentioned a technical school, but what will happen to our current school? Children need quality basic education before thinking about vocational training. Roderick smiled, grateful for the question. Excellent observation. Teacher Helen. The municipal school will be completely renovated and equipped as part of the second phase of the project, which will begin in parallel with the first. We have hired educational consultants to work directly with teachers on curriculum updates and the creation of a continuing professional development program for educators. The questions continued for almost 2 hours, much longer than planned. Residents wanted to know about jobs, environmental impact, how beneficiary families would be selected, the role of the town hall. Roderick answered all with patience and transparency, acknowledging when he didn't have an immediate answer and promising to research. When the meeting finally ended, many remained in the hall, forming small discussion groups. Mayor Anthony circulated among them, clearly trying to politically capitalize on the generated enthusiasm. Roderick noticed but didn't care. As long as the project advanced, he was little interested in who claimed the credit. You did very well, Sebastian said, approaching his son with slow steps. You spoke like a man who knows the land, not like a stranger. The unexpected compliment touched Roderick deeply. Thank you, Father. That means a lot coming from you. Dolores, beside her husband, had tears in her eyes. Your brother would be proud, she murmured, mentioning for the first time in years the elder son they had lost young in an accident. He always believed you would do something great. Roderick swallowed hard, feeling emotion rise in his throat. He hugged his parents, not caring about the curious glances around them. At that moment, he was not the successful businessman, but just a son reconnecting with his roots. The next morning, the machines arrived. Excavators, trucks, generators, and a team of 50 workers, some brought from outside, some hired locally. Jasmine Street, normally quiet, transformed into a hive of activity. The families had been temporarily transferred to comfortable cottages in the local guest house, hastily renovated to receive them. Each house had undergone a detailed assessment, and individualized plans were developed, respecting the original characteristics of the constructions, but incorporating structural and energy efficiency improvements. Roderick personally supervised everything, wearing boots and a hard hat like any other worker. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Executives from London desperate for guidance, journalists wanting exclusive interviews, celebrities interested in associating their images with the project. Most calls were ignored or passed on to his assistants. His priority now was Havenbrook. That afternoon, as he inspected the foundations of Mrs. Carmine's house, a luxury car parked on the street. An elegant woman, approximately 40 years old, stepped out, wearing clothes too expensive for that construction site. So this is where the great Roderick Mendoza is hiding, she said, approaching with an ironic smile. "I had to bribe 3 receptionists and threaten 2 assistants to find out." "Cecilia," Roderick recognized, surprised. "What are you doing here?" Cecilia Pratt was the vice president of operations for Mendoza Construction, and until 3 weeks ago, one of Roderick's closest associates. She had also been his fiancée for a brief period, before they both realized they shared more ambitions than feelings. "The board is in an uproar," she replied, looking around with evident discomfort. "You practically disappeared, delegated crucial decisions, moved resources to this project, and now you announce a regional headquarters in the middle of nowhere. Some directors are talking about a vote of no confidence." Roderick took off his hard hat, running a hand through his hair, now slightly grey at the temples. "The board should be satisfied. Our reputation has never been higher." After Bloomberg published that article about Project Rebirth, shares rose almost 12%. "It's not about the shares, Roderick, it's about you," Cecilia countered, lowering her voice. "They're saying you had some kind of nervous breakdown, that you're wasting company resources on a project with no clear financial return, that you've lost focus." "Perhaps I've found a different focus," he replied calmly. "Come, I want to show you something." He led her through the construction site until they reached a small hill at the back of the street. From there they had a privileged view not only of Jasmine Street, but of all Havenbrook. The contrast was evident. On one side, the frantic activity of reconstruction. On the other, the town asleep in time, awaiting its awakening. "Everything we've built to date, Cecilia, has been spaces for people who already had everything," Roderick said, contemplating the landscape. "Luxury condominiums, shopping centers, resorts, corporate buildings. We've created islands of abundance surrounded by oceans of need." Cecilia crossed her arms, impatient. "That's business, Roderick. We build what the market demands. And who said there's no demand for dignity?" he questioned. "Look around. There are thousands of Havenbrooks scattered across the UK. Small forgotten towns with wasted potential, talented people without opportunities, abandoned elderly, young people without prospects." He made a broad gesture with his arm, encompassing the entire horizon. "What we are doing here is not charity, Cecilia. It is social innovation. We are creating a replicable model of sustainable urban revitalization that can be adapted for any small town. And do you know what the best part is? It's economically viable." She observed him with an expression difficult to decipher, a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "How exactly will this generate profit?" "Initially through the company's corporate social responsibility program, which already existed and was underutilized," Roderick explained. "In the long term through public-private partnerships, sale of know-how to other municipalities, royalties on technologies developed specifically for this context, and sustainable real estate appreciation." He took a tablet from his pocket and showed her detailed financial projections. "I'm not throwing money away, Cecilia. I'm investing in the future." He paused, looking her in the eyes. "And I haven't had any nervous breakdown. On the contrary, I've never been so clear-headed." Chapter 6. The Return to Roots. 6 months had passed since the start of works in Havenbrook. The small town that seemed frozen in time now pulsed with new life. Jasmine Street, once the most dilapidated in the municipality, had transformed into a postcard of sustainable urban renewal. The old wooden houses had been carefully restored, preserving their original characteristics, but incorporating modern technologies. Solar panel roofs provided clean energy, rainwater harvesting systems reduced water consumption, and small community gardens flourished in previously abandoned spaces. In the center of the street, where once there was only a vacant lot, now stood the Sebastian and Dolores Mendoza complex, a set of facilities that included a health center, a community library, and multi-purpose spaces for the elderly of the region. The name had been a surprise to Roderick's parents, who were moved during the inauguration ceremony, held a month earlier. That sunny Saturday morning, Roderick walked through the town, greeting residents who no longer looked at him as a stranger, but as part of the community. He wore jeans, a simple shirt and boots, a look that had become his daily uniform, very different from the Italian suits of his previous life. He stopped in front of the old municipal school, now completely renovated. In the courtyard, children participated in a robotics workshop, part of the new curriculum implemented with the support of partner universities. Through the large windows, he could see teacher Helen guiding a group of enthusiastic students. He smiled, remembering how he himself had been one of those children, dreaming of a world beyond those walls. His cell phone vibrated in his pocket, a message from Cecilia. Presentation approved by the board. Project Rebirth will be expanded to 5 more towns. Congratulations. The news couldn't be better. After months of intense work and tangible results in Havenbrook, the Mendoza Construction Board had finally embraced his vision. The model would be replicated in other small British towns, creating a true movement of countryside revitalization. He continued his walk until he reached his parents' house, no longer the old wooden structure on the verge of collapse, but a solid construction that maintained its original charm with comfort and safety. In the front garden, Dolores tended her flowers while Sebastian, sitting on the new porch, chatted animatedly with a group of other elderly people. "Son!" Dolores exclaimed upon seeing him, dropping her gardening tools to hug him. "We didn't expect you so early. I thought you'd be busy with the factory inauguration." "The ceremony doesn't start until 2, he replied, returning the hug. "I came to see if you need a ride." The factory they mentioned was Project Rebirth's latest achievement, a production unit for sustainable civil construction components, installed in the old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. It would generate 50 direct jobs and hundreds of indirect ones, injecting new economic vitality into Havenbrook. "A ride?" Sebastian laughed, approaching to greet his son. "And missed the chance to debut the new community electric bus? No way. It's all arranged with the gang." Roderick smiled, recognizing his father's pride. The sustainable public transport system had been one of the project's latest implementations, connecting Havenbrook to neighboring municipalities and facilitating internal movement. For Sebastian and his friends, that first official ride was a gala event. "As you wish," Roderick agreed. "But will you have dinner with me later? I have important news to share." His parents exchanged intrigued glances but agreed. Roderick said goodbye and headed towards the large house that served as the temporary headquarters of Project Rebirth, an old farm on the outskirts of town, renovated to house offices and accommodations for the technical team. Upon arriving, he found the place in an uproar. Journalists from all over the country had arrived to cover the factory inauguration, and a small crowd of curious onlookers gathered at the main gate. Roderick entered through the back, avoiding the confusion. In his improvised office, very different from the minimalist penthouse he kept in London, he found Marina, the young local architect who had become his main collaborator on the project. "The final adjustments to the factory are ready," she informed him, handing him a folder with documents. "And the team from London has just arrived. They're in the cafeteria waiting for instructions." "Thank you, Marina," he replied, distractedly flipping through the papers. "How's the mood in town?" The young woman smiled, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Couldn't be better. The community radio station hasn't talked about anything else for weeks. Mayor Anthony is already boasting as if the factory idea was his," she laughed. "And 3 families who had moved to Manchester announced they are returning." That last piece of information was particularly significant. One of the project's central objectives was precisely to reverse the rural exodus that emptied small towns like Havenbrook, creating a cycle of depopulation and decline. If families were starting to return, it was a clear sign that they were on the right track. "And what about Rennie? Any news?" he asked, referring to the cousin who had betrayed the family's trust. Marina's expression became more serious. "The trial is scheduled for next month. He remains in pre-trial detention, but his lawyers are trying to arrange a plea bargain. It seems he didn't act alone. There were others involved in similar schemes in the region." Roderick nodded, thoughtful. The wound was still open, but it no longer bled as before. His cousin's betrayal, however painful, had been the trigger for a much greater transformation, not just of Havenbrook, but of his own life. The factory inauguration was a resounding success. State authorities, representatives of partner universities, Mendoza construction executives, and most importantly, hundreds of local residents attended. The governor, present at the ceremony, announced tax incentives for similar initiatives in other regions of the county. Roderick gave a brief speech, emphasizing that this was not the end of a project. but the beginning of a new phase for Havenbrook. The factory, named New Horizons, would be managed under a co-management system, with direct community participation in strategic decisions. After the official events and interviews, it was already dusk when Roderick could finally meet his parents for the promised dinner. He chose Mr. Juvenal's restaurant, a simple establishment serving homemade food that, thanks to the increased movement in town, now prospered like never before. "So, what's the big news?" Sebastian asked as soon as they settled at a discreet table at the back of the restaurant. Roderick took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. What he had to say would completely change his life, a decision that had been maturing over the past few months and had finally crystallized that morning with Cecilia's message. "I'm moving permanently to Havenbrook," he announced, carefully observing his parents' reaction. Dolores let out a small gasp of surprise, bringing her hands to her mouth. Sebastian frowned as if he hadn't understood correctly. "But what about your company in London? Your international business?" his father questioned, confused. "Mendoza Construction will continue to operate normally," Roderick explained. "Cecilia will take over as executive president, while I will remain as chairman of the board. I will make strategic decisions, but I will no longer be involved in daily operations." He paused, taking a sip of water. "As for international projects, I will continue to supervise some particularly important ones, but with occasional trips. My main focus now will be the expansion of Project Rebirth to other British towns, starting from here, from Havenbrook." Dolores had tears in her eyes. "Are you sure about this, son? Isn't it too great a sacrifice?" Roderick smiled, taking his mother's hand in his. "It's not a sacrifice, Mother. It's a choice. For the first time in many years, I'm doing something that truly matters," he looked at his father. "You taught me the value of work, perseverance, honesty. I applied those values to build a successful company, but I forgot to apply them to building my own life." Sebastian, normally so reserved, had moist eyes. "I'm proud of you." "Son," he said, his voice choked, "not for what you built out there, but for the man you became by coming home." Dinner continued with light conversation, plans for the future, and recollections of the past. Roderick observed his parents with renewed affection, realizing how many years of companionship he had lost by his own choice. He could not regain that time, but he could at least ensure that the coming years would be filled with the presence and affection that had been so lacking. At the end of the night, as they walked together back home, Dolores asked, "With that intuition only mothers possess. And what about your personal life, son? Any love on the horizon?" Roderick laughed, surprised by the direct question. "For now I'm focused on the project, Mother. But who knows? Havenbrook is full of surprises." His thoughts briefly wandered to Marina, the young architect whose enthusiasm and dedication had been fundamental to the success of Project Rebirth. There was a connection there that went beyond the professional, something that was beginning to blossom naturally, without pressure or expectations. They arrived at his parents' house, now a safe and comfortable home. On the porch, under the stars of a clear countryside night, Roderick sat in the rocking chair that had been his grandfather's. From there, he could see all of Jasmine Street illuminated by modern solar streetlights, yet preserving the welcoming aesthetic of the small town. Sebastian joined him, bringing 2 freshly brewed cups of coffee. "Do you know what I like most about this new house?" the old man asked, sitting next to his son. "What, father?" "That it still has the soul of the old one," he replied with simple wisdom. "Like you, son. You changed on the outside, grew, became stronger, but inside, you're still the same boy who left here dreaming of changing the world." Roderick reflected on his father's words, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. He had left Havenbrook fleeing poverty, limitation, the roots he thought tied him to a mediocre life. He returned as a successful man, believing he could save that place with his money and influence. What he didn't expect was to be saved by it, to rediscover the value of community, of shared purpose, of time dedicated to the people who truly mattered. While building homes for others, he rebuilt his own inner home. The luxurious mansion he had once imagined for his parents now seemed a symbol of his misguided priorities. The true legacy was not in imposing buildings or robust bank accounts, but in transformed lives, including his own. The next morning, waking in the small house he had rented near his parents, Roderick opened the windows to the Havenbrook sunrise. The aroma of coffee and homemade bread already filled the air, mingling with the smell of wet earth and vegetation. Sounds of life, children on their way to school, shopkeepers opening their stores, elderly people chatting on their porches, composed the morning symphony of the renewed town. He dressed quickly and went for his daily walk. Along the way, he was greeted by name by practically everyone he met. He was no longer the rich man from London, the son who made it big out there, but simply Roderick, the neighbor, the friend, the son who had returned. He stopped in front of the Sebastian and Dolores Mendoza complex, observing the elderly who were already arriving for their morning activities. Mrs. Carmine, now coordinator of the community garden program, waved at him animatedly. He continued to the natural viewpoint on the small hill that encircled the town. From there he contemplated Havenbrook in its entirety, past and present in harmony, tradition and innovation coexisting, simplicity and progress hand in hand. In that moment, he understood with crystal clarity. The true empire he had built was not made of concrete and steel, but of human connections, of shared purpose, of authentic transformation. It was an empire invisible to the eyes of his former associates in London, but perfectly tangible in the lives he touched daily. He had exchanged the cold glass of an isolated penthouse for the human warmth of a vibrant community. And in that exchange he had lost nothing of real value. He had only regained what truly mattered. Roderick Mendoza, the powerful architect of empires of steel and concrete, had finally built his greatest project, a path back home,